digital activism has undergone a massive transformation, especially in the last couple of weeks during the protests, and it has changed where the manner in which we leverage policies. It has enabled us to, come up with social and political change. And the first question I have is for you, Laura. How has digital activism evolved in Kenya over the past decade, particularly in the light of the protest that has been happening?
Okay. Thanks for that. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but yes, go ahead.
Okay. So when it comes, I've been a journalist for more than 20 years. And the difference is that when we started out, Facebook had just started. So Facebook was about looking for your old friends from school. And there was nothing really about activism. It was about just social media. So over the years, we started getting celebrities on social who we didn't have access to before, but people that we admire, and then that's what it was all about. But now it became more than that, because organizations started seeing that if you go on social media with the influencer that you like, then you're able to sell whatever service you're selling. You can sell soap, you can sell a school, you can do anything you want to do. But now, because it's such a very natural way of us interacting with one another, when the protest started, it just got a life of its own. All of a sudden, now, if I want any information, I can actually get it online, because there's somebody who's taken the time to put together whatever is in the ICTA bill, whatever is in the, digital, one of the digital bills, even with the finance bill itself, that's where it started. So now, digital activism is basically, one, getting information at your fingertips that you didn't have access to before. So if you paint it that way, then that's really a powerful platform to use, that you can be able to get information, share the same information, consume the information, and make informed decisions based on that.
We know that digital platforms such as TikTok and X Spaces have played such a crucial role in these times, and more people want to understand how they can get into it. James, I know as a digital activist, would you perhaps let us know how someone can advocate for their rights as well as others?
If you are into tech, you would build an app or a website that puts out information out there, a kind of public participation, civil education kind of stuff, that gives information to Kenyans out there about governance, about law, about constitutionalism, about the rule of law, about how an economy runs, and so on. Social media is easier because just involves getting into, for example, X, opening an account, same as TikTok or Facebook or any other platform that is popular. Then following up on should I say, the opinion makers and the drivers of these conversations, that would influence how you view governance, how you view law, how you view economics, and it would influence how someone expresses themselves in matters to do with governance and so on. But social media is easier than coming up with an app, coming up with a website, and so on.
Maura, I understand we have the freedom of speech, but to what extent can you say what you want online?
The limits on freedom of expression, because that's how it's denoted or quoted within the law, in fact, has to have an overarching effect on other people, because then why would you be expressing yourself to suit yourself? I mean, as I'm expressing myself, I should be able to actually affect the other person or the other group of persons. So to speak, that the limit should be, because not all rights are, are unlimited. There are those that can be limited, and freedom of expression is one of them. But the parameters through which that right can be limited is the observance of the effect of what happens when it is disseminated. So if I say, for instance, I don't like this space. Let me use this space. I don't like this space because I am an alumnus of the Catholic University, so I think I can say it. I really have an honest and a jovial feeling about this institution, but I'm using it as an example. I don't like this institution because it's a Catholic institution. That's my expression. It's an example, yeah? Just for the record. I see my very good dean and aunties here, so I have to qualify it. I have a right to say that expression because that is what I feel. Within the context and environment on the regime of human rights, you have to be able to take it out so that other people can understand what you're saying. And expression as a right, even though it can be limited, is something or is a right that is transient. It has to exist because then without the right to express yourself, then what society are we living in? Are we living in a cube? But because we don't live in a cube, and in the progressive regime of the Kenyan 2010 Constitution and all other enabling legislations that surround that, then for instance, if I were to call you over the phone and say and insult you, then there is a regime of law that says, this is the Kenya Communication Amendment Act, that says it's a misuse of a telecommunication device, which now becomes a criminal offense. But there's another regime for it. I mean, there's another discussion for it. But you can see that the limitations, in fact, are extended to what is permissible by law. If I take my phone and probably I call the Inspector General of Police and I tell him or her that you are such a fool by allowing your police officers to shoot at innocent civilians. Of course, I have insulted him or her, and is it permissible within the law? It is an argument which is on a slippery slope because I have actually told him the truth on one end, let's say, or her, but on another end, I have actually injured their personality. Between me and them, they are offended, or he or she is offended. But is it permissible? My correct answer is yes, because the extent or the measure to which the limitation operates is to permit that to be said. Because on one end, there is an injury that is permanent. What is that injury? There are police officers who have killed innocent, peaceful protesters. And it's a fact. So when you say you express yourself, if you are not allowed to express yourself, then you could imagine the explosion that will come when everyone is now tired of bottling up whatever they are supposed to express themselves. So it is a right which, in my opinion, is extremely important in the social democratization of a nation. If you cannot speak, if you cannot express yourself, I was just laughing about it the other day that we were coming from a time when imagining the death of a president. Remember, imagination is partly transient expression. You are imagining, I'm imagining a nice lunch today. Now, imagining the death of a president was treasonous. I mean, like, how do you even prove that? So imagine that someone will imagine that you've imagined. So you see, the context of where we are right now in the progressive legal regime that we are is that you can actually say it. You don't imagine anymore. You can say it. I don't want to say it because, I mean, I also don't want to test it, but you can actually say it.
Right.
That which cannot be imagined, yes.
And perhaps, let's say someone actually does say it, and there are legal actions taken against them. How do you defend yourself when you're taken in front of a court?
There is a presumption, especially on the regime of expression, because then there is the offenses of libel and slander, defamation. But when you're a public officer and an officer of the caliber of His Excellency or the deputy president or a governor or a deputy governor and so on, there is an expectation that someone will take a jibe at you just for the office that you hold. So it is contextually permissible to actually say it. And no one will take you to court over that remark. And if they do, then they suffer that ridicule of trying to prosecute an expression, a right. When you say the office of the First Lady is illegal, they are withdrawing public funds and misusing public funds. I have said it here now. There is no context in which that can be illegal in any case because, one, it's true, but number two, there is a higher question of public funds that you're speaking to. It's a very sensitive and emotive area that in a diaphragm of constitutional truth must be said. I'm not saying that you can say anything. There are those who say anything. I mean, you see the bloggers, they say whatever they say. And I'm not saying that we can caution or limit that expression, but if you curtail that freedom, then you risk having a bottled, unexpressed emotions which can lead to something which is totally unexpected and something which cannot be predicted. And I mean, look an example in the Arab world where these expressions are actually extremely limited. There is no historical context like what happened in the Arab Spring. It happens and everyone shoots up and everyone is, I mean, revolutions start because of one gentleman in Algeria setting himself ablaze. Because of that singular act. And in fact, wasn't that an expression in a digital world? And it was shared across the globe and it sparked a revolution within the Arab world and ended in Egypt. Went into the Middle East and ended in Egypt. I don't know if there is a better way, a better poetic way of making an expression than, you know, that self-immolation of a person, giving yourself as an ultimate sacrifice to express what you feel. Yeah.
As we've seen, platforms such as TikTok, X has contributed to so much in the way that people express themselves, but it comes with a lot of challenges. And Winnie, maybe if you can speak on data protection. What's actually there for someone's data to be protected? Someone is scared, might be scared that my information is out there, it's being tracked, I'm being watched. What are the outlines that are put in place for that?
Okay, thank you. We have the Data Protection Act in Kenya, which is a 2019 regulation. So as a natural person or as we in the data protection space, we say as a data subject, you have certain rights under the Data Protection Act, including right to information that an organization has about you. So if you feel that a certain organization has information about you and they've shared this information with, say, a government agency for them to track you, then you have a right to request that information to be given to you, and they need to tell you who they share this information with, and you also have a right to complain to the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. But what I've seen happening is most of these politicians are now weaponizing the Data Protection Act as well as the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, where you express yourself online and then you're targeted based on what you said. But then I don't understand why this is something that is happening. Yet the Data Protection Act is there to actually protect you as an individual and also safeguard your right to privacy and also promote other rights that you might have, including your right to freedom of expression, to express yourself, to say what you want to say about the organization without feeling scared. Will they come for me? Am I going to be next? What are they going to do about me? You know, and what will happen to my family? Such kind of things. So the Data Protection Act is a good place to start, as long as we do not weaponize it to go against the individuals that it is supposed to protect. For example, we saw the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner actually issuing a statement saying that the Salimia Yeye whatever campaign that was happening was against the rights of MPs to privacy. But then where was the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner during electioneering period, where most of us received text messages telling us to vote for me for this and this position?
There's the issue of internet access as well. During the protests, we saw that spaces such as X were shut down. The internet was slow. How do you go about that? How can someone access the internet even when there's government censorship?
I think the issue of internet shutdowns has been there for the longest time. And especially in Africa, we've seen regimes trying to make sure that people do not express themselves online, because we can see the impact where now the protests are moving from online to the streets. So what I'd say would be the best place to start is have a VPN. So when you have VPN, it masks your IP address, so it is not very easy for them to track where you are. So that is one of the ways that you can do that. There's also communicating through encrypted technologies. For example, if you feel like when you're communicating on X, it is say a public platform, everyone knows what you're planning, what is the next step and all of that. Can we move this into a place where it is more, I say closed, say there's end-to-end encryption, we can discuss issues there, say something like Telegram or Signal. such kind of spaces. The other thing I'd say is we maybe need to have a law in this country that speaks to accountability of these platforms, where these platforms can be able to protect individuals from the information being, say, shared, or from governments throttling the internet so that you don't share this information outside. So we need laws on that particular aspect. The other aspect I'd say is we need laws on the extent of surveillance that a company or a national government can have over you. Because as long as we do not have a law that limits national surveillance, if you can say that anything that the government does is in the public interest, is in national security, and we're not very specific on what this is, then it means that any information that you share, anything that you do online can actually be used by the government, arguing that it is for public interest or it is for national security.
Right. I think right now we can move to the audience, probably take 1-2 questions for any of our panelists. Anyone with the mic? Okay. I think we can continue the conversation and then maybe towards the end. And we're also live on X. If there's anyone who has any question on X and would like to pose it to any of our panelists, kindly you can take the mic as well. We have Farah on X. Yes, Farah, go ahead. Farah, you can introduce yourself and tell us who your question is to. I think Farah's having an issue with the connection, but I would like to move our conversation forward. Laura, people are very passionate today. Everyone is aware of what's happening. Kenyans are more informed more than ever. And maybe as a journalist, you can let us know, how can someone thread around misinformation, disinformation, so that they are not doing an injustice to themselves as well as their audience?
Unfortunately, there are no shortcuts when it comes to misinformation and disinformation. It's also a tool, just the way digital activism is a tool. Those who are opposed to your message actually come at you with misinformation and disinformation. And the only way to counter that actually is by educating yourself. So you do have, I guess, platforms of people like Linda Katiba, even the LSK. They're actually organizations that make it their business to give you correct information. And so the best way is to go look at this information, see what the truth is, compare it to what is being accused, and then you take it from there. I like what the gentleman said from LSK. Basically, libel and defamation, those are two things as a journalist you just have to learn, because anything that you report, which is the truth, has to fall under certain guidelines. So even when you start speaking on the different platforms, you have to be well informed so that what you're saying is the truth. And if you do see somebody who's misinforming others, and we've seen it happening a lot, especially on the X platform, you can actually go against them and say, hey, these are the facts, what you're saying is a lie. That's the best way to counter disinformation. But then you also have to be really keen. I mean, now, of course, you have people juxtaposing pictures on other pictures, putting audio where it wasn't there before. So if you do play around with those kind of technologies, then you're able to see some of the things that are truth and some of the things that are not true. So you do have to do your homework. When you look at something on social platforms, you have to actually investigate it a bit thoroughly, because even an announcement from State House saying the president is speaking at 2 p.m., you could have disinformation about that as well. So you just have to have your eyes open, look at the information that you're consuming very keenly, and anytime you see somebody misinforming or disinforming others, then you need to counter it, even just as a responsible citizen.
I hear we have a participant on X by the name Esther. Esther, kindly introduce yourself and let us know what your question is and to who. I think there's an internet problem with the X space. However, we can continue with our conversation. James, as we can see right now, people are very passionate online and they want to advocate for their rights, they want to speak their mind, but there's a sense of people questioning their sincerity and authenticity. They're like, are you even really doing this for yourself, or there's another interest involved? How have you, as a digital activist, managed to stay on your ground throughout the years for what you stand for, and how can someone at home, what can they take away from what you've practiced?
I think I would say that virtue is hard to come by. And that we've seen in the years before, politicians and some activists take advantage, actually they are opportunists, take advantage of, say, social agitation to benefit from it. So if you genuinely want this from the heart, I guess virtue can be taught, but then it has to come from inside you. You have to push it, you have to want it, it has to be authentic, and it has to be from you. Do it not for the love of money, do it not for the love of favors or whatever benefits some NGOs are giving out there, because there are NGOs out there and civil societies that are paying out activists, and it has happened before and it is still happening even now.
There was also this conversation this morning that you can be a digital activist, but you also need funding. I mean, where is that person, I don't know, supposed to buy certain items to even go out there and protest? What's your opinion on that? I think this can go towards my entire panel. You can start, James.
Well, I would agree to a certain level. You need funds for activism, for example, for placards, for banners, for their flyers, and sometimes goes to fare and maybe lunch. But it is possible to still have activism without all that funding. Actually, most of what has happened in the past few months for the Gen Z protests have actually not received a lot of funding from out there as some people think. Some of us have been contributing our own money to print T-shirts, to print placards, to print banners, to print posters. It's possible to not receive funding, but still do authentic activism.
We need the same question.
For me, I'd say there's a place for funding, but how I'd phrase it is this way. If we are going to fund, we can fund within ourselves, within the movement, the same way we've done Mchanga to contribute to the hospital bills, the way we had Kenyans for Kenya. Such kind of initiatives can be a form of funding for such kind of movements. We don't have to rely on other third parties to fund the movements.
Maura?
The ultimate test in resource mobilization for any organization is the purpose to which the resources are being allocated for. And you see, the main question around whatever topical issue we are discussing is the influence of third-party, transnational or trans-international players who sponsor local and domestic activities for purposes of a larger global sphere. So the question that we ought to ask ourselves is the extent to which the state can actually support such movements, because it is a guarantee and a right. And then with each right means there's an obligation on someone. So instead of just giving you a notice that we want to peacefully picket and demonstrate, we are also writing to Treasury that we need an allocation of, say, 10 million Kenya shillings to buy T-shirts, as my brother is saying, because it is within the diaphragm of a democratic space. If you cannot mobilize, for instance, if you can't do Mchanga or you can't do what is happening right now in terms of the pay bill numbers and the normative collection methods, then there has to be a legal way to address it, because the law in itself is not a vacuum, and the constitutive Article 37 is not like a platitude, a mere, oh, by the way, we have some ink left, let's just write Article 37. It has a meaningful purpose, and the purpose has a historical context. So when we are talking about resource mobilization or funding, let's not be embarrassed about it. Let's engage openly and say, yes, we can't go for maandamano if you don't have water. You can't go for maandamano if you don't have a face mask. Now we've learned you can't go for maandamano if you don't have, say, protective gear. Maybe we'll get to a point where we say, and this is normative constitutional discourse, that we actually need to invest in firearms. In firearms, in flak jackets. Because, all you are left with is a phone and a stone, and someone is carrying a live ammunition, which, by the way, and this is very important, many independent observers are saying even the ammunition that is being used is not traceable, is not something which is within a register that you can say, in the morning you left with firearm, serial number, blah, 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 with 47 rounds of ammunition. No, they cannot be traced. So it is a conversation that we must be able to talk about honestly, that, hey, look here, we need funds, not funds from, say, Ford Foundation, so to speak, or, the comical aspect of Tumetenga, 10 million Tumetenga. It's an honest conversation about a people-driven agenda, a people's-driven movement that actually requires serious funding. And this funding, in my opinion, does not necessarily have to come from within the movement. It can come from without, and especially government should be able to account for that resource mobilization, because it's the constitutional off button. You are switching off the system to switch it on again for a rebirth.
I think I agree to a certain extent. The biggest thing, though, is when it comes to funding, there has to be a way for it to be above reproach. So if you're getting funding, you should be able to say, this is how much we've gotten from here, so that it's not hiding as much as now that we can't trace the bullets even. But if you're open enough and say, okay, this is what we've received and this is what we're going to use it for. What has happened now, though, it's been good because just Kenyans collectively have been helping one another. Somebody brings water, somebody brings some Colgate that you put under your eyes, but there has to be some form of accountability. This is where it came from. There's even a lady whose kids wanted to join the protest at some point. It's like, you can't join me, but how you can help, just write this placard here, write what we're going to say on the streets. And that's their form of contribution to, letting themselves be expressed online on the streets. And as long as there's accountability, then I think funding should be an option. We have political parties being funded for their campaigns by the government. So why can't these activists be funded?
Final question. I think we'll make it short since we're headed to the next segment. But what trends do you foresee in the digital space moving forward? How can Kenyans use technology to not only speak their mind, but fight for their rights? Laura?
I think social media right now should be used as a tool of education, because you do have Good Samaritans putting all this information down, and we do not have an excuse as Kenyans not to be informed about what our rights are. So even when you are arrested by police, when you speak your rights, then they're also taken aback because they don't expect you to know. And I think civil education has been a big problem because we've always followed, going for the barazas in the different counties, going to talk to, people in the city halls. But then social media is such a powerful platform to be able to push civic education in the way that hasn't been there before. So I think going forward, it's going to be a tool for all the information that is needed. Like even right now, with some of the CSs being called back, you do have that opportunity to express your displeasure or your pleasure. But the fact that you know your rights now is the most important thing when it comes to the future of tech, when it comes to digital activism.
James?
I think I would agree with what she said, that this here is a public participation. And it was not so prevalent in some years ago. And we are going to have more of this all through the country. And I have seen, there's a gentleman called Galmadido too. I think he does his stuff on TikTok, goes and talks to citizens, then broadcasts it, I think records it, then posts it on his TikTok account. I think we will have more Kenyans doing that. We'll have more Kenyans engaging in citizen assemblies all over the country. We are going to decentralize this to the 47 counties and to all sub-counties. And I think it's about time we start thinking about probably using, for example, blockchain in our election system. if we had a blockchain technology conduct our elections, we would have maybe more verifiable elections in the future. An election where you can actually confirm without doubt that this guy got this amount of votes, this particular MP got this amount of votes, and so on. You can actually trace the rejected votes and so on.
Winnie?
For me, I'd say this is a space that is growing, and I think it would continue to grow into the future. I mean, right now we are seeing technologies that allow us to even search our members of parliament, what are the kind of corruption things they've been involved in. So the moment we're able to document these things, we can always come back and ensure that these people are accountable to us in the future. And also such forums like this, I'm sure they're going to continue into the future, where we have such kind of discussions that are affecting the nation and how best can we as citizens put our government to account.
Maura, final sentiment?
I believe that where we are heading to in terms of a global citizenry is that we will be able to use technology to even predict certain political outcomes. And with this, I mean, for instance, we could have technology that is AI-driven that will even predict grand corruption, will even predict effective use of public resources, will even predict certain outcomes in terms of budgetary processes that would be able to quickly make it easy or digestible to the larger public, so that these technologies will be used to assess, as my sister is saying, to assess and measure effectiveness of government. For instance, if a particular road was, set aside, some funds were set aside for its development, then it will be easier to use technology to measure whether there was effective use of public resources, and also to forecast a predictable way in which the political consciousness can be used. For instance, sadly to say that we have a vivid memory of what happened, say, in 1991, 1992, what happened in 1997, we forgetting what happened in 2007, and there were small skirmishes in 2013, now culminating to 2017. But you see, when you have backup of technology, unlike the human mind that is susceptible to emotional healing, technologies don't have that form of therapeutic comfort, so that you can use the same technology, in fact, to heal yourself politically by constantly reminding you of where you are supposed to be heading to. And we are seeing this. In fact, you've even given a better example. There are guys on X right now who cannot speak, or they are unable to speak. And that in itself is a barrier of what we are talking about. And the panel itself is on, technological activism. We have guys who cannot express themselves in a topical issue that is so relevant to what we are saying. We will not be able to have members of parliament who just, for the sake of it, insult the consciousness of those who voted or those who employed them, and then use the same law to say that they are protected areas, you cannot come to parliament. It's a relationship like a bank and the customer. Between my bank and myself, I am the creditor, the bank is the debtor. It's not the other way around. The member of parliament or the elected representative cannot be the employer. The employer is the voter. So I've never seen a rather comical issue that there can be a problem when your employer comes to your place of work to say hi. I mean, it's a simple issue. It's a human resource issue. The voters went to say hi to the employees. So anyway, I may be sidestepping.
Thank you, Maura. I wouldn't want to be the person that stands between you and your lunch. However, we have an artist in the room with us. Oh, we have one question. All right. The mic.
We will hear. Yes.
All right. Kindly let someone bring you the mic so that, yes, also our viewers at home can listen. Go for it.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good. As we get onto this digital space, activism, education, etc., do bodies like NCIC still have a role? And if they don't, do we have any more justification to keep funding them out of public resources?
I think that question is towards Maura.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I believe that even our historical context in why we have such constitutionally mandated bodies is for purposes of addressing a political as well as a social underpinning context that we find ourselves as a people. I don't want to say as a country, but as a people. As recent as 2 weeks ago, the legislator from, anyway, I know his name, Farah Maalim, for purposes of this context, I do not want to use the prefix Honorable Farah Maalim because there is no honor in that. It is important that they dig in more into the claw so that they can have the legitimacy and the purpose of why they are established. And this goes to all other oversight authorities, that the legal framework is there, but the goodwill may be lacking. And I agree with you, there is a larger call on why public resources are utilized and continue to fund them when they are ineffectively not doing what they ought to do. For instance, if you look at IPOA, and this is something that we must speak about, they have a statutory duty. In fact, as they sit as a board, one of their members is the Inspector General, one of their board members is the Inspector General of Police. The Inspector General of Police has a statutory mandate to report any human rights abuse that happens under the hands of the police. I am telling you with a lot of confidence that until now, there has never been any time that the Inspector General of Police has ever reported to the board of IPOA that a Kenyan has been killed by a police officer. As ridiculous as it sounds, because we all know that Kenyans are not dying because of bullets from Al-Shabaab or God knows Mau Mau.
Yeah.
I mean, they're dying because of the National Police Service. And when we changed that name from the national, when we changed it from it used to be called the Kenya Police Force, the force was changed for a reason, not because of constitutional glossing, but it is now a service, utumishi. Same as for the National Cohesion and Integration Commission. Its mandate is to actually enforce that as a Kenyan people, we live within the harmony and the cohesion of a society, a people that is driven towards harnessing humanity and development. So I agree with you, in fact, to that conclusion where you say if they are not serving the mandate, but then if we remove it, then we'll be left with a vacuum where politicians used to say madoa doa, they would go and say wale watu wa uko, wale watu wa uko, which, I mean, like for instance, the Gen Z, and I'm not saying in the context of what we are doing, but in another future, these guys do not look at each other as, they look at each other as, the concept of being a human being first, not the concept of being light-skinned, the concept of having curly hair, the concept of having big eyes or small noses, like me, broad bodies.
Maura, I think, yes. We have one more question on X so that we wrap up. Esther, kindly go ahead with your question.
The concept of having big eyes or small noses, like me, broad bodies.
Maura, I think, yes. We have one more question on X so that we wrap up. Esther, kindly go ahead with your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
We have one more question on X.
Hello, can you hear me, please?
Yes, go ahead, Esther.
My question is, Earlier I mentioned the travel budget for the president last year, which was 18 billion, can cover a lot
Yes,
of
go ahead,
the...
Esther.
Sorry, thank you very much. I mentioned earlier in this post that the 18 billion shillings that the president spent on travel last year can cover all the health and education sectors that have been cut off from the last year's budget and this year's budget. Things like the feeding program, the JSS teachers, Edu Afia, Linda Mama, matters pertaining to health and education that have been cut off from our budget, and we are being convinced that the country is too broke to fund. Yet we can fund an 18 billion travel plan for the president in 1 year. My question is to the Law Society. Because education and health is a constitution guarantee, is guaranteed by the Constitution, can we go to court and challenge this budget? The deputy president had a 1.8 billion budget for luxury items. There's a confidential expenditure that is almost $1 billion as well in the office of the president. There's the 18 billion for the president alone to travel. There's money, but it's going to luxury, travel, renovations, things that really don't matter. The spouses' offices, things that do not matter and that are not enshrined in the Constitution. Education and health is enshrined, and I want us to find a way to challenge these constitutional malpractices that we are seeing in this government.
We had a hard time hearing Esther's question fully, but I think it was towards Maura, and I think she needs clarification on the Constitution and the limitations of freedom of speech. Kindly make it short.
The Constitution?
Yes, Esther was asking on the Constitution and the freedom of speech. What are the limitations that are there when it comes to digital activism?
And I think we had discussed this earlier on, but I think we can take it a notch higher. As a segmented right, the right to expression can be limited, and it can be limited within a legal framework. There are many regimes of law that limit the right to expression. You will realize that expression cannot only be verbal or textual. That's not the only. For instance, if I mock you, like I just take out my tongue out and, like, it's an expression. If I, do a signage, it's also an expression. So the limitation of the right to expression is dependent on where it is heading. For instance, there are some insignia that have been globally designated as being contrary to humanity. For instance, the swastika. It is an expression. As we are currently heading, and sorry to use this example, I know even my aunt is here, but the use of the middle finger has now found itself politically to be permissible. It is no longer offensive. In fact, it is an expression that is used even within political circles as an expression of dissatisfaction. I'm telling you progressively, yes. You look shocked.
Are
you
you sure?
you look shocked, yes. Yes, it is no longer offensive. To some it is, but it is no longer offensive. It is progressive. So nonetheless, you see even the slippery slope that the freedom of expression is, even to our own panel, is that we are disagreeing on it. But I felt as though we agreed on it when I said about the swastika. Everyone was, yeah, swastika is bad.
Right.
I mean, 6 million people died over that thing. That thing is not good. But when I expressed it in a different way, there was disagreement. So that even that test is not an objective one. It is a subjective one, depending on the applicability and usability of the expression itself. If I wink at you, some people take offense. Some find it as a gesture of
Flattery.
Flattery maybe. Some find it as a gesture of acknowledgement, like, yeah, that guy, whatever that guy said is good. But to certain quarters, it is not permissible as being, even the LGBTQ agenda and their signage, maybe and it's an expression. It is an expression. And you see
Maura,
expression.
I
yes.
hate to cut you short.
You
yes,
should. You
but
should.
the conversation is continuing on X, and my name is Rukia Bule.